Welcome to the Disney Wedding Podcast. This show is brought to you by Carrie Hayward's Fairy Tale Weddings Guide, the only guidebook and bridal organizer tailored exclusively to Disney's fairy tale weddings at Walt Disney World. I'm Carrie Hayward, and each week I feature Disney wedding updates, money-saving tips, and interviews with wedding vendors and real Disney couples. I also cover honeymoons, anniversaries, and engagements at the Disney parks and resorts. Join me now as the Disney Wedding Podcast celebrates romance at Disney destinations. Today on the Disney Wedding Podcast, I am speaking with Disney bride Parker Hunstiger-Smith about her ceremony on Sunset Boulevard at Hollywood Studios with a reception at Tower of Terror. I thought you guys would be interested to hear how she chose these locations and how she planned everything and how it all turned out. So welcome, Parker.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being on the show today. I always like to start at the very beginning and find out how you and your fiancé decided that you wanted to have your wedding at Disney.
Well, that's kind of an interesting story. Initially, we didn't start out that way. I wanted a unique, nerdy wedding. And as we were planning our wedding, I was like, a traditional setting just, I feel like isn't going to work because I'm a huge vintage girl. And I wanted some nerdy elements in there. I wanted some Harry Potter, some Disney, some Lord of the Rings. And the traditional wedding ceremony and the venues I was seeing just wasn't cutting it. And previously, the first big vacation my husband and I went on was to Disney. So he was like, well, what if we look into getting married at Disney? And that's how that conversation kind of started.
That's awesome. How did your friends and family react when they found out where the wedding was going to be?
Some people I feel like were questionable. They're like, I don't know about that. But my family was very oh my gosh, that's so cool if this actually pans out. I don't know if anyone actually thought it was going to pan out. I think everybody kind of thought it was you had to be a millionaire to get married at Disney. So when we told them, I don't think everyone believed us right away until things started becoming official.
That's funny. Okay, so then how many guests did you invite and how many were able to make the trip?
We invited 50 and we had 42 come. So we kept it pretty small, just people that really meant a lot to us. And we kind of vetted everyone beforehand. We kind of gave everyone the heads up of, hey, if we do this, do you think it's feasible for you to come? So that's kind of how we arrived at that number as well.
Oh, that's a great idea. Did you set up a room block for your guests?
We did. That was pretty easy. I didn't think it was going to be easy, actually. I was very scared about that part of the planning. We wanted it to be sort of reasonable accommodation, but at a hotel that also had really good transportation to the parks. And that fit the theme. So the one that made the most sense to us was Pop Century because it's obviously a vintage hotel vibes and it has the Skyliner. So that worked out beautifully.
Got it. Can you talk a little bit more about your wedding theme?
Yeah. So I'm grandma core. That is my whole vibe of my whole life. And I knew immediately I wanted something very Old Hollywood, very glamorous vintage vibes. And I wanted not just me and my bridesmaids and the decor to have that, but my guests too. So that's a big reason also why we picked the Tower of Terror, why we picked Hollywood Studios on the street there, because it definitely has that aesthetic. All of my girls and my guys had vintage attire. And also my guests all dressed up. I was very I don't know if people are actually going to do it. My guests went full send on that, and it looked awesome. It was amazing.
That's fantastic. Now, since you were after hours, you probably didn't have much of a say on time of day, but how did you choose the day of the week for your event?
That was the only day Disney had available. So we didn't have a choice there really at all. It was really a choice between morning or night. And we just wanted everything lit up, so we picked night.
I see. So what time did they have you start?
They had us start at 11, and it went till 3 or 3:30 in the morning.
Okay. And so you talked a bit about how the Tower of Terror fit your vibe. How did you decide to have your ceremony on Sunset Boulevard with Tower of Terror in the background and then use Tower of Terror for the reception?
My husband and I, we both were looking through the different options, and the courtyard was on there, and I was like, man, I really want to be able to see the Tower of Terror in the background because that's what makes it cool, right? Seeing the sign and it all lit up purple and the ambiance of it. And my wedding planner at Disney was like, well, we could do this. We could have your ceremony in the street. So she actually was the one that recommended it to me. And I think that's something like for future, like if another person does a Disney wedding, you can always ask for locations outside of the provided list. I wasn't aware of that. If you tell them what your vision is, Disney will work with you, which I thought was really cool.
I'm really glad you mentioned that because, yeah, I think a lot of people think that the list that you get is it. And that's why I keep a list on my Fairy Tale Weddings Guide website of every venue with photos of every venue because they aren't going to tell you all of them. And also sometimes, like you can kind of come up with an idea together on a place that maybe isn't even an official venue, but it works because it's adjacent to an official venue.
Right. And that's exactly what happened. And I was like, cool, that's pretty magical.
So did you use any outside vendors for the portions of your event that you were able to?
I guess if you count hair and makeup, I guess that technically counts as an outside vendor. But basically, Disney gave us all the materials possible of steaming people, hair and makeup, that you could have people come in from outside. And I just went off their list because I was like, I want to keep my life easy. So I just went with their recommendations and trusted that they knew what they were doing. I'm very much that kind of bride where I was like, I'm not a control freak. I want to exist and I'll trust that you guys know what's up. So that actually was very easy as well because the vendors on the Disney provided list already worked with Disney weddings. So they already knew the drill and could direct me and tell me how things went. And it was very nice. It was very seamless.
That's wonderful. How did you choose your officiant?
My officiant was my godfather, actually. I wanted a family member just because it's special. And I just wanted somebody that I knew because I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do with a random person. I wanted to feel very comfortable and not super nervous. So that's why I went with a family member.
Got it. Okay. Now, you talked about having a theme for your ceremony and your reception. How did you incorporate that?
Yeah, so for the ceremony specifically, that was really big on the old Hollywood glam. So to give you some examples, like I gave my guests on their invitation, I said Peaky Blinders, like Gilded Age, Great Gatsby kind of vibe, just to give them some ideas to work off of. So people showed up like that to the ceremony. The groomsmen all, instead of boutonnieres, had antique brooches that I thrifted, and that looked super cool. And they didn't have a suit coat; they had vests to make them look more old school. And then I had my vintage gown and my vintage veil and everything, so it very fit the vibe. And my girls had all of their hair and makeup styled in that era as well, so it was very pin curls and very stylized hair and makeup that looked very Marilyn makeup as well, with the red lip and the pale face, and that really pulled it all together for the ceremony. For the celebration, my husband and I wanted to play into the creepiness of the Tower of Terror, so we told Disney, we're like, this is kind of what we want. We want spooky, we want cobwebs, we want death, we want creepy. And it sounds kind of morbid, but we wanted it to feel kind of like an extension of the Tower of Terror. And we just said, Disney, that's kind of what we're going for. We're going to trust you that you know what you're doing. And they came up with just awesome ideas. With the floral, they actually had my floral sit out for like a day or two to die a little bit, so it looked withered and old. And then they covered it all with cobwebs and had like spiders and insects in all of my floral on my tables. And it was unbelievable. It was so cool. And everything was very dark, and there were lanterns and flickering candles, and everything was very creepy, and it was very cool what they did.
That's awesome.
Actually, my gown was really the thing I feel like that set the tone for this whole aesthetic I was going for, because I always said my gown was going to be the focal point and I was going to build everything else around it. I went dress shopping traditionally at like the dress stores and nothing really fit my vibe, because I really wanted like the long sleeve. I wanted the old school like choker neck with the mesh bodice and all that and the exquisite beading. And no one really has that in stores nowadays. So I was like, oh, I'm going to have to go an alternative route. And I was looking on Facebook Marketplace, and this woman said she had like a warehouse of dresses. And when I showed up, it was actually a garage. And my mom and I show up, and I kid you not, nothing was organized. It was just piles and piles of just dresses from everything from 1920s all the way to like 2000s, and you just had to dig. And after about 4 hours of digging, we found a dress. And we were like, how much are these dresses? And the lady was like, everything in here is $30. So I ended up thrifting my dress. I ended up finding a dress from my flower girl that was a vintage 1920s dress. I ended up getting a veil in a flower girl basket. So I ended up getting all these vintage pieces from this lady's garage. And it just sort of worked out that way. And then what was really cool too is I did have a second dress, and my second dress was my mom's wedding dress that I actually cut short. And she had like a huge train on it, so I cut it like a short little party dress and kept the long train on it. And then I wore her veil then from her wedding. So it was cool to, because it was still vintage. I considered it still vintage since it was my mom's. So it was a cool experience to wear that.
That's a great idea. Did you guys add any kind of entertainment like musicians to the ceremony or the reception?
That was unique as well. We actually, and I didn't know you could do this either. This is another good point for people. We had a violinist at our ceremony, and for music, you either had to pay for a whole sound system or they just play the Tower of Terror cue like music for the ride. And then the wedding planner from Disney was like, well, you can extend the violinist, which is significantly cheaper than getting a whole sound system and a DJ and all that jazz. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so much more affordable, and it's a lot more classy and very much fit the aesthetic. So we ended up going with that. We just extended our violinist into the celebration, and that worked out great. And it was super money friendly. So for other people should look into that option because that was great.
Now, from the celebration, do you have any menu items or cake flavors you would recommend?
Since it was so late at night, we wanted to do like snacky stuff. So a big hit that we did was like park snacks. So we did like Mickey waffles, Sunday Station, Mickey pretzels. Those were a huge hit. Cake, I mean, I'm really basic with cake. So it was just vanilla funfetti chocolate. It was amazing, but it wasn't anything like super special. My cake, this is kind of a fun fact, my cake was styled after Priscilla Presley's wedding cake. I asked them if they could do that. They did it. It was pretty cool. But yeah, I thought it was cool that you could have the option to have like park snacks at your wedding, because I was like, I don't know if I want fancy food. And they were like, oh, we can do park snacks. And I was like, that's super cool. So we just did that.
That's wonderful. Did you add any other events around your day, like a welcome party or a farewell brunch?
We didn't do like those, but we did do two other things around to make it magical for everybody. Since everybody was coming, we really wanted to give back to our guests as well. So the night before the wedding, we took everyone on a fireworks cruise. So we had like 3 boats. We had everyone go out on the harbor together. It was super cool. That actually wasn't that expensive either. Highly recommend that. We did that as part of our rehearsal because it was cheaper than like a dessert party. And it was super fun. Like, highly recommend that. It was amazing. The second thing we did the day after the wedding is we took everybody on a VIP tour, and that was pretty magical too. So that one wasn't as economically friendly, but it was cool.
Okay, so can you give my listeners a timeline of how your wedding day all fit together?
It was at night, so everything started later in the day, which was really great because everyone could sleep in, kind of relax, get ready. For the girls, for us, getting ready started at like 2 o'clock because the hair with the pin curls and everything was so extravagant that hair timeline needed to start way early. That's not typical. It's just that hairstyles in particular were very complicated. Yeah, everyone just kind of got ready. I At Pop, the rooms are a little small, so what I ended up doing is I actually booked two rooms across the bridge because at Pop there's the Art of Animation across, which are the suites. We got two suites for getting ready, one for the girls, one for the guys. That worked out great. We had everyone just kind of get ready there, hang out. At around 10 o'clock, the photographer came and took pictures of like getting ready and fun like shots with the guys and the girls. We ended up having two photographers, one for the guys, one for the girls. Highly recommend that. I'm really happy we chose two instead of one just because we were able to get a lot more pictures because of that in the short time frame that we had. And then we also, to get to the park, we had two cars, one private car for the guys, one private car for the girls to drive us to the park. And then our guests had a bus that picks them up at Pop Century. And one of my aunts just coordinated to make sure all the guests got on the bus. It was very easy. It was very seamless. I'm also happy we did the private transportation. That was incredibly helpful because initially they'd have everybody go on the bus. For future people having a Disney wedding, pay for the private cars to the park. It's way more seamless. And then when we got to the park, it was really cool because everything was lit up. The music was on. It was like the park was running at full capacity with nobody there. It was the most magical thing I think I've ever experienced in my life. And it was cool because my girls and I just got to hang out and take really cool pictures in the park before the guests came on the bus. And that was just such a magical moment because you just kind of got to wander through this empty Disney park that you would never get to see. And it felt like it was literally all for you. It was crazy. So that was kind of my timeline for leading up. And then obviously the guests arrived, ceremony happened, and because my ceremony and celebration were so close together, that's another good point, actually. Having those two things close together saves you a ton of time and money because then you don't have to transport to a different area. My whole group just got up and walked up the street towards the Tower of Terror, and it was super easy. And it saved money on transportation because typically they'd have to either drive you to another area of the park or you'd have to walk through it, and it just wastes a bunch of time. It's literally right up the street. The reception happened. And basically there was a coordinator there that took care of everything. So that was another thing. I didn't have to worry about a thing. She just kept us on track, kept everything going, made sure we got the cake cutting, the dances, the speeches, all of that on track. She made all the announcements. I just felt like I was along for the ride and I didn't have to worry about anything. And then at the end of the night, Disney takes care of everything, packs everything up, and you just walk out of the park with your group, and then everybody rides back to the hotel on the bus. It was the most seamless thing ever. I did not expect it to go that smooth.
I know a lot of people are worried about having a late night in-park event because they think their guests are going to get tired or they're going to want to leave early. How did it work for you?
Honestly, I thought I was going to have complaints about that. I didn't have any complaints. I think just because everyone was wowed by the fact that we're in the Disney park by ourselves, that was crazy. And the fact that like everybody knew that's what was going to happen, so everybody like prepared. They slept in, they took naps, everyone had caffeine. I heard from multiple guests that were saying, "Oh, it doesn't even feel like 3 in the morning right now." And I was like, "I know." So I really think as long as you prepare your guests for, hey, you need to prepare, make sure you like get yourself ready for that, it should be fine. I didn't have any issues.
That's great to hear. So out of all of this, what ended up being your favorite memory of your wedding day?
My favorite memory was probably when I was reading my vows in the middle of the street. Everything's lit up. The vintage music of Hollywood Studios is just playing throughout. You can hear it like echoing throughout the park. And I turned my head and I just saw the Tower of Terror and the flickering like sign of the Hollywood Hotel. And I was like, I'm here right now. It was so surreal. I can't express how cool that was and just how magical it felt. And I think that's what was really cool about having your wedding in the actual park is not even just you, literally everybody feels magical because it's like, whoa, we'll never get to experience this again. And I kept hearing that from everybody. So I would say that was probably my favorite memory ever, was just being there with my husband and the tower just looming over us.
When you guys were planning, what were some of the most important aspects of the event where you focused your attention or your budget?
Budget wise, most of our budget went to decor just because I wanted this very specific aesthetic for my wedding. So a lot of it went to the extravagant floral displays and the props at the celebration and just bringing the look of what I wanted together. That's where we really put a lot of our money. Floral made a huge difference. Floral was incredible. Honestly, that was worth every penny, in my opinion. Second thing that a lot of our money went to was the food. That was probably just as important because obviously you want your guests to enjoy what the food that's actually being served there. And then thirdly, I would say the venue. The venue was also, it was costly, but at the end of the day, I would say the total of our wedding was no different than what it would have been in my hometown. So it really honestly worked out.
Got it. Okay. Were there any aspects that were less important where you saved your money or just your effort?
Yeah, honestly, like Disney provides you a list. You mentioned some of them, like the dessert parties or like all these extra additions you can do. The big thing I would say is there's stuff you can do outside of the list that are a lot more cost effective. Like a dessert party for 50 people would have been very expensive. Instead, we opted for our rehearsal to do the fireworks cruise, which was a lot more cost effective and just as magical. So I would say get creative with your additions. You can still make it magical on a budget. You just kind of got to get creative, and you can always ask your planner. My planner provided me a lot of other options outside of the list. That was very helpful. So just ask questions because Disney will give you more than what's on the list.
That's great to hear. Now, did anything go wrong or just not turn out like you expected?
Honestly, no. I felt like it was perfect. And I didn't think it was going to go that way. I honestly did not, but nothing went wrong. I felt like I was in great hands. I felt like Disney knew exactly what to do, and I could just enjoy the experience, which is, I think, is worth it for a wedding because I've had other friends get married and they were a basket case and just very stressed out. And I was not because I trusted in Disney and Disney knows what they're doing and they definitely proved that. So I think that alone was well worth having my wedding there for that reason too.
That's fantastic. Was there anything that seemed like a big deal beforehand or you were worried about and then it turned out not to be a big deal?
Definitely the room block. Definitely the hotel. It was difficult to figure out like what we should like what guests should spend on a hotel, like what hotel we should pick for our guests. You have to meet a certain room nights number for your room block. Otherwise, you have to pay out the rest that don't get filled. So that was a little stressful because I was like, "Oh, how do we determine that number?" And I don't want to pay for an exorbitant amount of nights that aren't being used. And that was a little stressful, but the room block coordinator was great and they do that a lot. So they just kind of carried us through and said, "This is what I would recommend. This is how I would do this." Yeah, I would say that's probably the most stressful part of is that for sure.
Got it. Is there anything you would have done differently knowing what you know now?
No, honestly, no. When I say it was perfect, it was perfect. Like my biggest advice would just be to trust that Disney knows what they're doing because they do. It was a shot in the dark for me and it worked out great. It was better than I expected and exceeded all of my expectations.
Do you have any other tips or advice for future Disney couples?
Yeah, The only reason why I was able to make a Disney wedding happen is because my husband and I planned in advance. If you want to have that magical experience, save a year at least or two in advance, because that's how we were able to make it happen. And Disney will work with you on pricing. That was another thing that I think a lot of people, just you tell them you're getting married at Disney, they're like, oh my gosh, how are you affording that? Disney will work with whatever budget you give them, and they will stay within that budget. We gave Disney a number, and they stayed within that budget. You can always decrease or expand that budget, but if you think, oh, I don't know if I can have a wedding for this amount of money, Disney can make that happen. It may not be in the parks, but it's possible. And I think that's what's really cool about Disney is the fact that they have those options and they are so flexible with price. That was something I was very, very shocked about. So that would be my best advice right there.
That's great advice. Well, Parker, I think you've offered a lot of great tips and advice for anyone who's interested in getting married or having a vow renewal at Hollywood Studios, and I appreciate your taking the time.
Thank you so much. This was great.
That's our show for today. I'm your host, Carrie Hayward, inviting you to join me again next week for another episode of the Disney Wedding Podcast. Past shows and tons of photos for each episode are available on my website, DisneyWeddingPodcast.com, or listen in your favorite podcast app. And for instant answers to all your Walt Disney World wedding questions, check out Carrie Hayward's Fairy Tale Weddings Guide, available as an interactive ebook with continual free updates at fairytaleweddingsguide.com.